Hosea chapter number 1. And verse number 1 says this: The word of the Lord that came unto Hosea, the son of Beeri, in the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah, and in the days of Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel. The beginning of the word of the Lord by Hosea. And the Lord said to Hosea, Go, take unto thee a wife of whoredoms and children of whoredoms, for the land that hath committed great whoredom, departing from the Lord. So he went and took Gomer, the daughter of Diblaim, which conceived and bare him a son. And the Lord said unto him, Call his name Jezreel, for yet a little while, and I will avenge the blood of Jezreel upon the house of Jehu, and will cause to cease the kingdom of the house of Israel. And it shall come to pass at that day that I will break the bow of Israel in the valley of Jezreel. And she conceived again and bare a daughter. And God said unto him, Call her name Lo-ruhamah, for I will no more have mercy upon the house of Israel, but I will utterly take them away. But I will have mercy upon the house of Judah, and will save them by the Lord their God, and I will not save them by bow, nor by sword, nor by battle, by horses, nor by horsemen. Now when she had weaned Lo-ruhamah, she conceived and bare a son. Then said God, Call his name Lo-ammi, for ye are not my people, and I will not be your God. Yet the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured nor numbered. And it shall come to pass that in the place where it was said unto them, Ye are not my people, there it shall be said unto them, Ye are the sons of the living God. Then shall the children of Judah and the children of Israel be gathered together and appoint themselves one head, and they shall come up out of the land, for great shall be the day of Jezreel. I don't know if we, very briefly, I'll open the floor here if anybody has thoughts or comments. If you don't, you don't. I don't know if these ones are probably a little bit different to the Psalms, and it may not generate the comments or the feedback. But if there is, now's the time to throw it out of this chapter if you have something.
How do we relate that to what we're going through?
We're about to get into that. It's a very good question. The practical. We're going to do the past, the present, and the future of what it means. And I first heard about this Hosea story when I was in Bible college. There was a lot of things I realized just growing up, that there was portions of the Bible that I just never heard about. And there were things, I grew up in church from a 3-year-old, and so pretty much, or 4-year-old, 5-year-old, however old I was, young enough from memory to grow up. So for 15 years, through Bible, through Sunday school, through school, through church, and yet I realized, man, there's so much about the Bible I don't know. And Hosea was one of the books that I just never remember ever hearing anything about, and being one of those books. And the first 3 chapters of Hosea are probably some of the best chapters in all of the Bible. And you look at this and think, well, what do you mean? It's definitely the most striking of any of the ministries of the prophets. This is one of the most striking of all the stories, is the story of Hosea, who was a prophet to the northern kingdom. He's at the same time as Isaiah, but Isaiah was to the southern kingdom, to Judah, to Jerusalem. But Hosea is to the northern kingdom, and you see them, and he's in the days of Uzziah and Hezekiah, which is who Isaiah was was the prophet during those days. But he is to Israel, to the northern kingdom. And it says here in verse number 2, the beginning of the word of the Lord by Hosea, the very beginning. This is how his ministry begins. And the Lord said unto Hosea, Go, take unto thee a wife of whoredoms and children of whoredoms. The most striking of all of the words that came to the Lord. There's 2 ways to look at this. One is to say that he is writing this many years removed, looking back, and maybe when he went to get married, maybe Gomer, who he marries, verse 3 says, when he took Gomer, the daughter of Diblaim. Now, does he know that she is at that moment a woman of whoredoms? Maybe she came from a checkered past. Maybe she had a history, and then it seemed like everything was good, and she says, yes, I am now pledging to you and to you only. They get married. Does he know at that moment that the type of woman that Gomer will be in that marriage? I'm not sure. There is one way to say that he's looking back and saying, I took Gomer, and in writing in hindsight, God has told me to marry a woman of whoredoms who she turns out to be. But does he know it then? I'm not sure. That's one way of looking at it. Another is to say, yes, he absolutely knew it, and he knew that she was not faithful, and yet still he chose to marry her because God had led him to marry her. But either way, there's obedience there. As Sam asked, what does that mean? I mean, if God said to you to go and do something that you know is crazy, would you go do it? Obedience to God, if you absolutely know this is what God is leading. And there is a line between faith and foolishness, and it blurs. A lot of people blur it, and some things that they say, so a lot of Christians will say, oh, I'm of God, I'm doing this. And it's like, man, you're actually transgressing other commandments in the Word of God to go do what you said God has told you to do. It's actually foolishness, though, masquerading as faith. But here is one that is clear. It doesn't contravene any commandments or laws. And he takes this woman, and instead of this marriage being the wonderful, wonderful marriage that everybody dreams their marriage to be, it's the exact opposite. And I listened to a C.S. Lewis quote today, a preacher preaching out of this, and he read the C.S. Lewis quote, and I can't remember, I didn't write it down, and I probably should have, but basically saying that to love, if you are to love someone, you cannot love somebody without making yourself vulnerable. When you love someone, you now become vulnerable. You place your heart in their hands and vice versa. And C.S. Lewis was basically saying that if you don't want to be hurt, then don't love anyone. Just go lock yourself up. Don't get a pet. Don't go have friends. Don't get married. He says just go lock yourself up in a room and you will not be vulnerable. But he says you'll also become you'll also become hard and cynical and a whole heap of other things. So he says you then got to love. You become vulnerable. And when you get married, you become vulnerable. You know, there's things that happen. And here he takes Gomer, and Gomer is outright adulterous. She cheats on him on numerous occasions. And in amongst it, though, there's these children that are born to him. And the Lord, these children's names are absolutely central to the story as well. They're not without significance. The first one here is a son. A son is born into this marriage. And the Lord said unto him, call his name Jezreel. Does anybody know anything about Jezreel or who was a Jezreelite? Anybody know who lived in Jezreel? Could be. I don't know. It's not who I was thinking, so I'll just say, sure. Jezreel, in the actual meaning of it, means sowing, to be sowed. To be scattered, like you scatter a seed, is what it means to be things. But Nabal, remember Naboth? Nabal, now I've got the two mixed up. Who had the vineyard? Naboth. Well, he has the vineyard. Well, he is a Jezreelite. Ahab lived in Jezreel. They lived in Jezreel. And when Ahab wanted the vineyard, and Naboth said, it's not for sale, this is part of my family heritage, it's part of my family lineage, can't give it to you, it's mine, I'm sorry, no matter what. And Ahab says, blank check, just you name your price. He says, it's my heritage, you can't. Jezebel comes along, his wife, and says, look, honey, I'll take care of this for you. Get some men of baser sort, false accusations against Naboth, has Naboth killed, comes back to Ahab and says, guess what? Naboth is dead. He's dead. You can have the vineyard now, it's yours. And instead of Ahab being shocked and aghast at what his wife just went and did, he just went down to the vineyard and took possession of it. Like, oh, okay, I'll take it. It's what I wanted anyway. And so that's in Jezreel. Now, does anybody know who ends up wiping out Baal worship? Remember, Jezebel brings in Baal worship. Jezebel was the daughter of the high priestess of the Zidonians, brought in Baal worship. And so there's Baal worship all the way through the kingdom. There was the prophets of Baal in Elijah's day, remember, that all ate at Jezebel's table. It means she was providing for them and she was paying their way. Does anybody know who wiped out? Jehu. Jehu comes along the scene, and Jehu is the one that wipes them out. And Elijah anoints Jehu to be the next king, and he also anoints Elisha to be the next prophet, one of the last things that he does in his ministry. And you read this verse, "For yet a little while, and I will avenge the blood of Jezreel upon the house of Jehu, and will cause to cease the kingdom of the house of Israel." He says this northern kingdom has got so wicked that they are just killing citizens to get their possessions, which is what takes place in Ezekiel. If you remember, Ezekiel saying these are the wickedness of the city. They're just living completely for greed and for idolatry and for uncleanness and lewdness and murder and blood. And he says, I'm going to lay it upon you. And Jehu comes in, and it seems like he is zealous for the things of God, and he's definitely, from a carnal sense, you think, man, you like Jehu, he rides furiously. He's a man's man of sorts, but he's also just as bloodthirsty as the rest of them, kills them all and takes the kingdom for his own gain, and he becomes the king. But all of that displeased God ultimately. God looked down and saw just the utter wickedness that was taking place, and he says, right, I am going to call his name Jezreel, your son, and he's going to be assigned to the nation of Israel, the northern kingdom, because Jezreel means scattered. I'm going to scatter you. You're going to be scattered like seed is going to be scattered. Then he goes on and says in verse 5, "And it shall come to pass at that day that I will break the bow of Israel in the valley of Jezreel." The Assyrians are going to come and they're going to be destroyed. And God is going to bring judgment upon Israel because of their sin. Verse 6 says this, "She conceived again and bare a daughter, and God said, call her name Lo Ruhamah." Lo Ruhamah. Now, Lo Ruhamah means no more mercy. Ruhamah, I think, is mercy. Lo means no. So no more mercy. So he is saying that for I will have no more mercy upon the house of Israel, but I will utterly take them away. He says, I am done with their wickedness, and I will no longer give them mercy. And you think, well, isn't God merciful and long-suffering and always merciful? Well, no. And in fact, even when he is no more mercy, he is in fact still being merciful, though, in a strange way. If a child is continually acting up and misbehaving, and you give them mercy and you give them mercy and you give them mercy, and they're continually being rebellious in the mercy that you give them, it's actually not merciful to them to let them continue in that way to be self-destructive. It's actually merciful to have no more mercy. To say, right, no, this is not good for you to continue in this way. And there's judgments that are going to come in to stop you in your destructive behavior and in your destructive ways. And so he says, call this daughter Lo Ruhamah, for I will have no more mercy upon Israel. But he says this, I will have mercy upon the house of Judah, and I will save them by the Lord their God, and will not save them by bow, nor by sword, nor by battle, by horses, nor by horsemen. He's saying this, Israel, the northern kingdom, is going to go into captivity, but God is still going to be merciful to Judah, and they're going to last longer as a result. So he says, you are going to be cut off and scattered, but Judah is going to continue, which is exactly what takes place. And then you have this third child, verse 8. Now when she had weaned Lo Ruhamah, she conceived and bare a son. And then said God, call his name Lo Ami, for ye are not my people. Now Lo Ami means not my people. So he says, for ye are not my people, and I will not be your God. And so he is saying through these names, I will scatter you. You are going to be scattered, and you are going to no longer have mercy from me anymore, and you are not my people. And people say, well, doesn't God have a covenant with Israel where they are his people forever? How can they not be his people? It's like saying to a son, again, if Zach goes out and misbehaves in a terrible way, and I probably shouldn't say Zach particularly, but any son goes out and misbehaves in a terrible way, and they are your son, and you might say, well, in one sense, yes, they are my son and they will always be my son. But in another sense, to say, that's not my son. That's not what I raised him to be. That's not what I told him to be. He's off doing his own thing. That's not my son. We understand that saying and that meaning of it, and that's what God is saying here. Right. Though, yes, they will always be my children, but they are not acting like my child. They are not my people, and I will not be their God. And so judgment is coming upon the northern kingdom, and because of their sin. And one preacher called it like this. He said it's the drama for the ages. Means what takes place here, and this is only an introduction for chapters 2 and chapters 3, and ultimately for the whole book, but the setting of the scene is Hosea's life. And for Isaiah, for what he is going through, that he has married an unfaithful bride, and his children that are his are out of this unfaithful marriage, he is only dramatizing the relationship between God and Israel. That Israel is the unfaithful bride towards God. God has been faithful, and yet Israel went and worshipped all these other gods and were unfaithful to whom they made a pledge and allegiances to in their vows to God and God only. And they went and played the spiritual whore in the right way of that word. And so it's a drama for the ages. And here's the thing. No doubt Hosea was very, very famous. Everybody knew Hosea, and everyone would have seen the scandal of Hosea's life, and that his wife is off here. And guess what? People would have been at parties, and Gomer shows up to those parties. And you know when someone's at parties that shouldn't be at the parties, that word spreads. Man, guess who was there? Guess who was who I saw at the nightclub? Guess who I saw here, or guess who I saw there? Guess who I saw at the pub down there drinking with everybody else? He should, Rhiannon. No, Zeno means the person that you wouldn't expect. The wife of the pastor. That's what I'm trying to say. Because half asleep on that one when I was straight over your head. And she's not even here to be shocked and horrified either. But that's the same thing here, where Hosea is his life is a drama for the nation of Israel. And they could see the scandal and the hypocrisy in Gomer's life, but they couldn't see it in their own life. And God is exemplifying before them how they have treated him, and they're disgusted, no doubt, at Gomer, and they're gossiping and thinking all the terrible things about Gomer, and yet they can't realize, yes, but you've been unfaithful to me, God is saying. You're unfaithful to me. And the story of Hosea lays out most striking story you probably have. And chapter 2 is going to come upon us, and chapter 3, which is short but has a punch in it as well. Read chapter 2 next week. And this is an unfolding thing. We're not going to give you all the answers tonight. But know this, you want to take something practical away from this? What does it mean? What does it mean? What does it have to do for us today? Man, be faithful to God. Because even when we think things are crazy in our lives, God is showing sometimes his glory, even through the craziness of our lives. And he's looking for obedience. Not necessarily, God isn't going to give us this wonderful life on a silver platter. That's not this side of heaven. Sometimes this side of heaven life is difficult and hard and absolutely gut-wrenching. And yet God has his way even in the storms. I'm going to leave it off there, and we'll build this story next week a little bit more.